work on pony show trivia for BabsCon.
Love your glimmy.
Ponyville Centerfest, going to con history on YouTube, and it's cons before and after Brony. I think that's a good summation of all the slides that I have. For this version of the panel, since I just did this panel QuaiCon in Hawaii, and my throat kind of gave out, and I'm dealing with some allergies right now. I think I'm gonna do a different version of this panel, since we have such a wide collection of a lot of former chairs of different cons at this event. I thought it would be fun to do a different version of this panel where we just kind of talk about the entire, our experiences running cons, doing cons, or just the history of conventions. So for the full version of my panel, go check it out on YouTube. For this one, we're going to do something a little bit different. It looks like my panelists are here, so I'm going to allow themselves to introduce themselves. So I guess.
Hello, my name is Simmel. I was the chair of EverFree Northwest for 3 years, staff for much longer than that, and I was also a staff member for BronyCon for 5 years, from 2015 to 2019.
What did you do at BronyCon?
Yeah, tell everyone.
Oh yeah, you might. If you ran into one of the 3 mascots at BronyCon, I was one of those 3.
Famous, musician Hoofbeats.
There you are, right there.
Yeah, there you go.
It's right there, he is, right here. All right. Dex, you're up.
Hi, I'm Dexanth. I was the vice chair of BronyCon the last 2 years, and then if you attended any of the Ponyfest onlines during the pandemic, I'm the founder of that.
Hello, I'm Sheer. I ran BronyCon the last 2 years, 2018 and 2019. I've helped out with basically all the other PonyCons for the last 10 years, and also shared some other stuff, Mag West, Mag Labs, a couple other fun events from other genres.
Very fun. So if you haven't, feel free to grab one of the postcards. I have them up there. If you stay for the end of the panel, I have these little con history lanyards you could take. And just to quickly introduce myself, you guys might know me as one of the community guests here, ChocoPony, but I'm also been working on a con history book. You can follow me on Twitter at conhistory. Send any details to conhistory@gmail.com. And I guess just a little quick summary of some stuff I've been covering before we move straight into the PonyCon stuff. I've been looking at cons more from showing that they're kind of part of a larger family tree. A lot of us think that, oh, the furries, Brony, otaku, all of them are separate little communities, when in reality, all of them have interfed with each other. And I think I used to have them all separated at the beginning, but we could trace every single con now directly back to the science fiction convention roots. Specifically, while a lot of science fiction fans will like to use Leeds or the UK event in Leeds and PhilCon as the first convention, I like to use WorldCon as the very first convention, and we could trace almost every single type of con, PonyCon, anime cons, comic cons, all to this WorldCon, which was the original root. Trekkies are the, I'm going to mention 2 fandoms for the importance they've done within the convention scene. One, of course, is the Bronies, the other ones are the Trekkies. Trekkies were responsible for a lot of the, what we now know as multimedia cons, the Trekkies were responsible for. They were the ones who kind of shifted to the multi-track programming model. Before then, for 40 years, there was only one panel at a time. And the party floor is really where a lot of these different cons started to split off. So Babs has that tradition of the party floor. So go up there, check out the party rooms. The Klingons have a room, take part in that tradition. Bronies and furries, we could say, are kind of the love child. The Bronies are the love child of the furries and the Trekkies. I'll explain a little bit later, but yeah, just because we have we have a lot of panelists here, I don't want to go too much into con history, so we're going to just talk about the Brony side, and if you have questions, I'll just refer back to some of my slides.
And if you visit the Klingons, order a revenge.
Yes, revenge is great.
What's in that?
I don't know, but just the less you know, the funnier it will be.
Okay. Some Malort.
No, the revenge tastes fine. It's what happens surrounding the revenge. I don't want to give too much away.
Fair enough. I haven't been to a
Okay, we have pictures similar with the Babs room party side.
Yeah.
So I think I do want to point out something that I like to talk about within the history, the DNA of conventions. You could kind of trace where each con came from based on what style of staff, department, and what titles they used for their different events. So almost every single con will use the science fiction con template. The science fiction con, specifically WorldCon, was the one that started the hotel block model that we're associated with now. They're the ones who started with the one guest of honor before the comic and anime cons just started to fill up their con books with so many guests. They were the ones who came up with the programming track, which evolved to multi-programming once Trekkies started to fill up the conventions. Movie screenings used to be something that were popular at these events as well. But the party floor was the main thing. That was where you would meet your like-minded fans, because you have to remember, science fiction, now we kind of think of this as a specific genre, but back during this period, science fiction was a catch-all term for all pop culture. So if you were a fan of anime, cartoons, comics, you were going to a science fiction con. And to meet up with your other like-minded fans, these early science fiction cons will have room party floors with a bulletin board. So I had that one up earlier. So this is a really old flyer that I saw at one of the WorldCons. I think this is the exact same sign that gave birth to the anime and furry cons here in America, so that's been around for decades. But before, if you go to anime cons now, they traditionally have meetups for different fandoms. You go to furry cons, they have meetups for different personas or species. To meet up back then, you would have to go to different room parties. So someone might say, go to Hyatt 304 at 8 p.m. if you're a Doctor Who fan, and we'll meet up with Doctor Who cons. And this is where a lot of these cons start to get born. Like almost every fandom con we could see came from this tradition. And what's unique about Babs is while most pony cons can trace their roots to either a Trek con or a furry con, Babs had a big influence from the science fiction con scene, specifically BayCon in the area. And for the longest time, BabsCon was the only pony con with a party floor and a similar bulletin board. So I just like pointing out the little DNA when you actually notice it, it's there. Dex, were you involved with early BabsCon as well, or?
No.
You weren't, okay, yeah. I think I was there for the early days. I was one of the founding chairs. They asked me to come in as the early design lead. So if you see the logo for the con, that's one of my designs. The mascots were my design. Yeah, so go check out the room party floor. And I think, let's talk about how each of you got involved with the convention running scene. Sure, we'll start with you down there, because you started when you were in high school, right?
Yeah, way back in the day, all my friends were working for BronyCon. I don't actually know if this is on.
It is.
Okay, great. Well, way back in the day, all my friends were working for BronyCon, and I thought, this sounds like a lot of fun. And I took a sort of circuitous route working for Big Apple PonyCon and a couple of others. My first year working for BabsCon was back in 2014. Working for registration, like once I got that first taste of working for the BronyCons, I was so hooked. So it's now been almost 10 years of volunteering for a variety of different BronyCons, and I think I'm going to be here until the cons die or I do. So we'll see what happens first.
So back in the day, I was living in Ohio, and I went to my first con. Basically, was a little known one called Canterlot Gardens, which was way too crowded. And then I went to the second TrotCon, and a website I was affiliated with was like, hey, do you want to write a press article for our front page? And that led to doing press things, which eventually led to doing volunteer things and charity, and then from there I just kind of branched out.
I first got involved in this fandom in 2011, started watching the show between seasons 1 and 2. From there, got involved, realized that there was a local meetup group for bronies. If anyone remembers back in the day, meetup.com was a really big place where local groups of fans could meet up. Got involved in the Seattle Bronies, went to my first convention ever, Emerald City Comic Con 2012, back before ReedPop bought them, so it was quite a different scene at the time. And yeah, a bunch of people were throwing together a pony convention in Seattle, one of the first ones in the country, EverFree Northwest. And I attended, I was just an attendee the first year. I've been every single year, started staffing in 2013, and yeah, I've just sort of grown the circuit since then.
Are you all still pony fans?
Of course.
Of course.
Well, it's
Name your favorite G5 pony. I think what's interesting is each of you three were respectively the chair or vice chair of technically what was the largest ponycon in the world at the time. So of course you two were running BronyCon, which I love to point out was actually larger than the furry cons around that period. So
First to 10K, baby.
it's funny that the furries always say bronies are a subsection of the furry fandom, but then when you point out, oh, that would mean BronyCon was the largest furry con for 3 years, it just kind of goes silent at that point. Yeah, that's fine. And then you were the chair for EverFree during the last 2 years after the pandemic, when BronyCon was no longer around. So technically, EverFree at that time was the largest BronyCon in the world.
Yes, though by default, it's certainly a pretty big margin when you have an event like BronyCon that.
Yeah, I think this is your graph you showed me. So this is BronyCon attendance.
Oh yeah,
versus all
this
the
is a
other
graph
ones.
I made in Google Sheets like a long time ago. I'm so good at graphs.
And here's BronyCon in blue compared to all the different furry cons. So it was MFF, that was the first to really overtake BronyCon. But if we compare them to like anime and comic cons, all the Brony and furry cons are like down here. And you have Anime Expo right here, the New York and San Diego Comic Cons up here, and I think this is Comic Kit. So
Who knows what the gray means?
Pandemic.
So actually, you two talking about the final BronyCons, specifically, you were during like a period where it was reaching its height, and then you had to naturally end the con. So give us a little brief synopsis of that experience.
Oh, sure. Well, you know, we kind of like looked around in 2018 and we're like, I don't think we can do this forever. and luckily our timing happened to be pretty good, but there was kind of this general feeling amongst the staff that, you know, we had sort of reached the peak of what we could do, and it was time to say goodbye. But you know, I was talking with some friends about, we were joking, I must stress, joking about BronyCon coming back. And
It will not, but let's be very clear, it's dead.
It's not coming back. But one thing that we always get back to is, you know, how much we love it and miss it. So I think we were all very, very, very sad to say goodbye, but also it was so great that we got to do it with this big, huge party and like this awesome year and tons of fanfare. And then COVID hit anyway, so we couldn't have kept running BronyCon.
Actually, it was a perfect timing, actually.
It was a good time, thankfully.
We've spent years talking how happy we were to not deal with the stress of running a convention during COVID.
Yeah, and one of the nice things as well is that I think it's really given other PonyCons a chance to flourish. So for example, we talked a lot in 2019 about how we were hoping that other PonyCons like EverFree and Babs would see this wave of attendance. As people didn't have BronyCon to go to, they would find other cons. And then COVID hit, so of course that didn't happen. But now that it's been a couple years, I think we're starting to see that. So EverFree had a great year. HarmonyCon a couple weeks ago, not Nightmare and Dallas. HarmonyCon had a great year as well. I heard, you know, numbers were really, I think they had their best year ever.
They had over 1,000 for the first time.
That's amazing. So, you know, even though the fandom maybe has changed in shape, it's really incredible that there's still people who are willing to come out, and that delayed wave of like post BronyCon attendance is finally coming in and hitting all the other cons. So.
And Dex, you specifically, since we brought up the pandemic, you were responsible for really getting the online con scene moving, and I always like to credit the Bronies for really getting the lockdown virtual cons growing, because the Bronies kind of had experience doing fun online cons beforehand, so it made sense that Bronies were really the first to make one specifically during the pandemic. You were heavily, I guess, responsible for the creation of PonyFest, so talk a little bit about that.
Well, I need to make it clear. So the way PonyFest started is Roof, who's one of the artists, had formed an artist alley online, and basically I looked at that and I went, to draw people into this, you need additional content. And then there's a little Telegram channel that a bunch of us hang out in, and I'm like, someone should make an online horse con. And then I went to bed. And I woke up the next day and I'm like, no one's gonna do this if I don't do it. So I started recruiting, and one of the first people I recruited is in this audience right now and is the real reason PonyFest worked, and that's Catherine over there. Woo! Who is the tech genius who coded all of the custom stuff that like all of the online PonyCons ran on throughout the pandemic. So if you went to any of the online events, give her a giant round of applause, because I was just an idiot with an idea. Cat was how it all came together, as well as, you know, the rest of everyone else who stepped up to volunteer. But yeah, we put the first PonyFest together in literally under a week. Like, it got started on the Saturday around 2 or 3 in the afternoon East Coast time, and opening ceremonies were the next Saturday around 10 or 11 a.m. East Coast time. And we basically did a bunch of them in the early pandemic before kind of pandemic fatigue started to set in, and everyone moved online, and some events got it, most events did not.
Like if you compare it to what the Comic Cons and Anime Cons are trying to do, it's not even close to the, I guess, the amount of energy and detail the Bronies and later furries put in. And I would say it was really only because PonyFest was so creative with how they did their musical events, their panels, partnering with Ponytown, I think was really what gave rise to the furries eventually wanting to recreate a similar thing, but in VR chat. So if you've seen the furry virtual cons, they would recreate their convention centers and that by. I don't think the furries would even gotten to that point if it wasn't for the friendly sibling rivalry Bronies and furries had trying to one up each other.
Also want to give a quick shout out to Southeast Asia BronyCon, because they did something really unique as well, in that they built a convention center inside of Minecraft. It was like a heavily modded version of Minecraft that you could just download as a package. And yeah, you got your vendor hall right there. They were able to they built panel rooms in a convention center in Minecraft, and they were able to pipe their live streams onto a big screen made of blocks. And it was really cool. And they did that before the furries did the VR stuff.
Again, I think it was the furries that followed through with that, saying, oh, we should probably do that better.
One of the things I remember back then is when we announced like PonyFest 2 and 3, other conventions getting angry at us for like, why aren't you giving us any room to breathe? And I remember thinking, because like, why not? The original vision for PonyFest was actually for us to host like the other horse cons kind of in our venue, aka the Discord server, but logistically that just didn't end up working out.
But PonyFest did partner with, like, I think, Babs, Trot, and the Charlie Cons for...
Well, no, we did not. Catherine partnered with them in order to do all of their technical back-end. I can claim 0 credit for this. Again, Kat is the real hero of the pandemic.
You should be up here too, so, yeah. If you want to talk a little bit about it, because you played such a big role, so if you want to talk a little bit about it. No worries.
Talk about the whole time you spent a month coding up an entirely custom technical backend that like no one else has replicated except maybe that one VTuber company like 3 years later. We could be rich if she let me sell it.
It was very impressive though, for people that participated in PonyFest in any way. There was so much going on the back end of that. Like what you see in the server, plenty of places for people to chat there, but there's a whole other area where it's just staff working together and coordinating people, making sure people know when their time is coming up, getting the streams, troubleshooting the streams. People that are having trouble with their OBS crashing or not working, and having that happen on the back end in real time, and then some really great software that Kat put together that brings everything together and gets it to the right place.
I think there was one panel that we couldn't get to work, and so I had to basically go on and ad-lib for like 15 to 20 minutes until we were able to get the technical issues resolved.
I also want to point out how many, just on the stage, all the people were talking about how influential the trans fans in the community have been in running PonyCons. Like, if we think about it, Purple Tinker founded the first BronyCon. Trans individual, almost every single con in this fandom has been founded or cheered by a trans individual, which I think is really, really cool, which is why I think the BronyCons on the whole were really the first cons to adapt a lot of things like the gender-neutral bathrooms, the pronoun ribbons, the communication tags, and I think it was because of how, diverse our con running scene was compared to the other cons around the time.
Before, for the last BronyCon, I had a musician reach out to me and say, hey, I was a well-known musician in the fandom, but I'm trans and I changed my name and I want to apply for BronyPalooza, but I'm kind of nervous and I don't know how to communicate this. And I was like, our head of BronyPalooza is trans, I'm trans, the vice chair is trans, literally the entire leadership is trans. Please do not worry, we have you, don't worry. It was really cool though, and BronyCon, so you have a picture up there of the color communication card. So that was an idea pioneered by the autism self-advocacy network that our design leads picked up and ran with, and now I've seen replicated at several other conventions and furry events, maybe even a sci-fi event too. But I really love those badges. I wish they had, I wish they were a little more cost-effective to manufacture. Is really what I wish, because they're such a great tool for communicating. How are you feeling right now?
I remember when MFF started to do those, and everyone's like, "That's such a brilliant idea. Why hasn't any con thought of it before?" And it was like BronyCon was doing it at least 5 years before MFF did. So.
Someone just needs to come up with like an electronic version of that you can sell for like $50, and then you buy it once and you're done forever.
Yeah. Any vendors in the room, please?
Yes. Actually, I'm just curious, were any of you involved with the entire Unicon thing?
No. Well, I was watching from afar.
I remember watching it from afar with a mixture of.
I did find
I don't know what words to pick there.
Yeah, the folks who were running EverFree at that time ended up sort of getting roped into some of the salvage work that was done at that time. But no, luckily, just from afar for me as well. I had a lot of friends that were there and were like in the group of people that were just stranded, so that was fun.
I do know that if Las Pegasus had not happened, Hasbro would have banned all talent from attending pony conventions.
Yeah.
So the fandom basically saved itself without realizing they were doing that.
I think that was like not only the changing point in the BronyCon scene, but all the other cons, like not just BronyCons, Comic Cons, Anime Cons, Furry Cons had emergency meetings, and it gave birth to a department that Bronies were the first to create, the VIPR, Viper, Guest Relations Department, that have since been adapted as a similar department at almost every other genre type of con now. So another thing that the Bronies kind of influenced.
Yeah, to be clear, does everyone know what we're referring to? Las Pegasus Unicon?
Okay, so that was like the Dash Con for the Brony fandom.
Yeah, we did Dash Con first.
And I think it have been Dash Con because, like I said, it gave rise to a lot of new contingency plans, a lot of emergency backup, and a lot of like reformations of different types of cons.
Yeah, and the VIPR name specifically was something that like came out of that and was adopted by BronyCon as basically, I heard, by the way, that the name Viper was sort of an arbitrary pick. But I was looking through my Google Drive last week, and I happened to find from 2013 a parody of Raise This Barn from the hit show My Little Pony, if any of you have heard of it, called Save This Con by Josh, Dean, and Fulner, the former chairs of BronyCon, written in the aftermath of the LPU disaster. And I'll just share a little bit. Save this con, together we can save this con. Down, 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 go the funds. Time to get serious, help for fun. Con goes bankrupt in one small go. Grab a new con share, here we go. This goes on, by the way. They really went all out for the parody.
Also bankrupt and they eventually had to demolish it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was later, that was not LPU's fault.
No, yeah, but that's why they had such a good deal.
Yeah, and to show how important that was, like before the BronyCon started to do a lot of the VIP art stuff, most cons, if they didn't follow the sci-fi con model, which normally just had one guest of honor and maybe one fan guest of honor, the anime cons and comic cons would do nothing but fill their con books up with tons and tons and tons of guests. And that caused a lot of the guests to be overworked, overstressed. That's why a lot of old school convention runners call these cons cattle cons. Think about the big, Comic-Con, Repop cons where you're waiting in line for autographs, you're waiting in line for panels, you're waiting in line for exclusives. And most often this will overwork your guests, make them not want to come back to cons. And for the longest time, like how anime cons and comic cons were used to do it. Oh, our guest doesn't want to come back, who cares? We have hundreds of writers and VAs we could pull from. And it was after, like again, some cons tried to take care of their VAs. Like Mukage talked about how they would send a limo out for their guest of honor for AnthroCon, but it wasn't really until Unicon and the BronyCons shifted to the VIPR model that a lot of cons tried to shift to that model. But some of the big cons still don't really treat their guests nicely. So.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's really important to note that when we're dealing with a fandom like this that is single IP, the only other real example we've talked about has been Trekkies, where we don't have a big pool of guests to pull from. It's expanding now, thankfully, because of G5, right? But for a long time, it's like if you tick these people off, that's it. right? And eventually you're gonna get to the bottom of that barrel. You can't keep burning
For the
through
longest,
people
think
like
about
that.
it. For the BronyCon started when season 1 was still airing, right? You had 6 main characters, right? Voiced by 4 VAs. 2 of them are hard to get. And you have all these cons around the country fighting for like that handful of VAs. What do you think is gonna happen? Unlike, and we were talking about, unlike Trekkies. Trekkies can pull from the original generation, Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, all the way to J.J. Abrams and the new CBS shows, right? Bronies are very unique as a con running community because we don't really care about G1 to G3, and G5 is still new enough that we're not going to pull any guests from. We're the only major fandom that pulls specifically for only one incarnation of that show, which makes it hard for the guests to, you know.
So you don't pull any guests for
Any
G5
guests at all.
ever, you say.
If you want to see G5,
Yes,
you
go
can come
to
to EverFree
EverFree, yeah.
Northwest.
We had them last year.
Yes, well, as a whole, most don't try to pull from G5.
Well, it's an evolving landscape,
Yeah,
right?
because it's still new.
Because this is the other thing too, we talked a little bit about how, COVID really threw a wrench into things where, we were expecting to hopefully see this, the BronyCon bump is what some cons were calling it, that when BronyCon's over, all the people that would only go to BronyCon are now gonna have to choose other local cons and, spread the support around. Then COVID happens, throws a wrench into that, and the end of G4 also, just yet another factor that throws this heavy fog of war over the same thing that we're still not quite through. Like, we're still kind of climbing out of it, and we're beginning to see that, like, yes, things can keep going. I mean, people keep coming to cons.
Anyways, come to TrotCon.
All right, but even before like that final BronyCon ended successfully, but there was that too. And I think that's something I'm curious about because that's during your year or two time on staff. So how were you feeling when the dip started happening? Because it was a consistent 3-year dip.
Well, I mean, if you're talking the absolute height of fandom energy, that was like 2014 into 2015. Things peaked in 2015 and you began sort of that plateau downwards, which you can, see in a lot of the numbers there if you're looking at them. Like, he's 2015 and basically every con begins trending downward there.
Though I will note, EverFree did not start descending quite as soon as some of the other conventions, and this is something that I've thought about a lot of the EverFree people have thought about a lot. EverFree is always, if you've been to EverFree, there's a really big focus on family-friendly, kid-forward programming. And so one of the things that we've been thinking about is, there was a little bit of an energy dip that led to a lot of decline. EverFree did see that dip, but it was slightly delayed, and we credit that to the kids and families that come to the con. When one demographic declines, you can make up for it in other ways. And that is something that I think makes EverFree uniquely interesting, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, and BronyCon's identity was really predicated on it being the biggest. So when it started to be not the biggest anymore, BronyCon had an identity crisis, which it turns out is very hard to solve, if any of you have ever experienced this. And if we weren't going to be the biggest, well, we played around with a couple ideas. We played around with the idea of pivoting, expanding, trying to reach other markets. But fundamentally, if you are made to serve one specific IP, like you are made for the Brony fandom, you can't kind of go like, well, we're now just going to be for other fandoms. It doesn't really work like that. So there was certainly, so far, yeah. I guess there might be cons that try and pull that off. We'll see what the next couple of years bring. But after a lot of soul searching on staff, I think none of us wound up coming with a satisfactory answer for what can we do to bring the energy back? What can we do to get more people? We've gotten all the VIPs. We can get more VIPs. So eventually, after a few years of that is what led us to end the event, or at least one of them, which I think overall was the right decision. It was the time for BronyCon to go.
I spent months fighting against this decision, and I am happy to admit that I was completely wrong. It was time for us to take that horse out back and, go Old Yeller on it.
Old Yeller was a dog, first of all.
Blue Factory is what you're looking for.
So did each of you have any interesting story you might want to talk about your time staffing con, whether you were cheer or not?
What to talk about? Yes, can talk about. That's what I had to spend time thinking.
Yeah, maybe use filler words.
There was the one time that I was rushing down the hallway towards you at EverFree because someone found teeth in the escalator.
Oh yeah, Cole's running down the hall going, they just told me there's teeth! So anyway, I had to follow along. I was like, there's teeth, I gotta see this.
And apparently this is like a joke at like the Midwest cons or something. They weren't real teeth. But I was up in my room and someone over the radio said something about teeth in the elevator. And I'm like, teeth? Human teeth? Like what? Like I can't hear you.
Teeth.
Yeah, someone put fake
So there's like
human
face teeth you could buy on like Alibaba.
Don't do this.
And
Like, please,
yeah,
don't.
they just toss them everywhere.
It was some weird prank, and they were not real teeth, and it was fine. But that was a strange thing. I'm like,
You were in hazed?
didn't know this was part of the. Was I hazed?
Was that hazing? Like they were your hazing too?
You looked hazed. I think it was hazed. I'm retroactively saying it was hazed.
Other stories?
Alright, I have a little sweet one since it's actually tied to BabsCon, which is Sheer and my relationship, I guess, basically began because of BabsCon, since both of us had a day in San Francisco in 2017, and so we just ended up hanging out together, and that was really the first time that we ever talked in any significant way, and basically led the way to BronyCon, and now we run a con up in Seattle called Idolfest together.
Good day. I have a less sweet BabsCon story. BabsCon, takes the cake. Okay, all right. 2 BabsCon stories. One of them, hearing over the radio, Andy Price just barfed in the back hallway. We didn't clean up that. Toasty Writers is tonight, by the way, at 8:30. If any of you want to see, hopefully nobody threw up in the back hallway, but it's anyone's game. Second, my absolute favorite con story of all time. One morning in Babs 2017, 2018, I get a call saying, hey, we can't get into the green room. And I was like, oh, your key card must be dead. I went up, my key card worked, but I couldn't open the door. We tried other key cards, they also didn't work. We realized the door was locked from the inside, but there should have been no one in the green room. We got hotel engineering to come up and eventually unlock the door. They had to
I got woken up like, hey Dex, are you in the green room? Where's your key?
Oh yeah, no one was in the green room. We were like, okay, there's no one in the green room. The door is just mysteriously locked from the inside. Hotel engineering brought out the hacksaw on the wire. Eventually, they got the door open after 45 minutes. And there was a woman in there that none of us had ever seen before in our life, who screamed and told us to get out of her hotel room. It was not her hotel room. It was the BabsCon green room for the VIPs. She had gotten it somehow, slept there overnight, eaten a bunch of our food, including a cookie that was decorated like Pinkie Pie, which I'm still not about. It was a really cute cookie. And then she lied and said that she couldn't speak English and said she spoke Spanish, and the security guard spoke Spanish, and then she said, oh, I actually speak Italian. She didn't speak any language, except English. And eventually we managed to get her out and get the green room back. But that was a really fun 3-hour start to the day when we could not get in the green room. Yeah, it was takes the cake. Weirdest thing I've done.
Was she even from the con?
No, she was so...
Was she just a hobo and randomly found it?
We don't know.
Something was not right there.
She did leave some alcohol behind though, so we enjoyed that.
She left a nip. She left we divided it up into a couple shots and this is a good night.
Yes. Shady booze?
Yeah, we'll
save room for Q&A at the end, so if you have questions. Trying to think about it. Okay, I remember one BronyCon used to do a luncheon where they invited the cheers from not just other BronyCons, but OldCon, and even the furry cons there. And I remember just one time, all of us were just having a luncheon, and all of a sudden one of the staff radios for the BronyCon staff started to perk up, and everyone jumped out of the seat from every other con. And Uncle Kage was like, "This is not our con, not our problem." And sat down. I just thought that was the funniest moment.
Reflex.
I love that so much. All right.
Whatever happened to that guy?
Yeah, let's go.
He still runs
back
that con.
into the history of things because you have to
con
remember for the
full of
longest
things?
time, cons were basically run volunteer style, like what we're doing, and then you had these crazy pro cons, the Breed Pops, Wizard Worlds, Creation, that just kind of took over all these different cons. And I think it's kind of unique that the Brony fandom has not really been touched for the most part by the pro con model. Aside from, I think Corgi events would be the closest that we've had. So if you guys don't know about Corgi events, I think this is kind of funny to talk about. So there was a group of people who made these weird plushies called Cutie Corral, and they wanted to sell their plushies at more cons. So it was let's just create cons to do it. So they created a bunch of cons, including Ponyville Santa Fe and Winnie City, which are now owned by Charlie. So great. After they started making plushies, they realized, oh wait, we could make fursuits and sell a lot more and make a lot more money, so they shifted to making fursuits as Lemon Brat, and then that's when they started to create a bunch of furry cons, and even for a period, apparently they owned like Anime Milwaukee.
Corey chaired Anime Milwaukee. There is a slight distinction.
So it was weird that they had all this stuff, and it was like really the only time the furry and Brony communities had a pro-con like kind of motto. And when I went to, I like how unique that was, because most people don't realize that a lot of the stuff that the furries are now adopting from Bronies, I think unintentionally came from what Corgi brought to the scene. So let me see if I can bring up my timeline again. That's actually why in this little timeline I had the Corgi events kind of branch back into furries, because if you look at how furry cons are run now, they are like almost copying everything a lot of the Bronies were doing, because the Brony style of running concerts, so if you go to any BronyCon, a small pony convention with a few hundred attendees to the largest Brony conventions, I think we are like the best community for doing concerts. Like we not only have this great fandom talent in the community, but we like put on some of the best concerts with some of the best AV teams. And if you go to a lot of furry cons now, if you look at the AV team, they were all like former BronyCon AV staffers as well. And this is where I also think the gender neutral bathrooms, the communication tags, and everything that we kind of associate now with the modern furry fandom started to migrate over when Corgi events started to do this on mass scale with their events before they collapsed. They brought a lot of the Brony stuff over, so that's where some of the DNA comes back there.
Yeah, there's a ton of cross-pollination between staffers too. So like often con staffers after a certain point, they're like, I actually don't care about the fandom anymore. I just want to like go run AV or something, or go run registration. AV is very, very commonplace where this overlap happens, by the way. And BabsCon's AV team is basically all furries. Just gonna spoil that for you all.
Yeah, it's like BabsCon was basically founded by furries and Trekkies, so that actually makes sense when you think about it.
And the funny thing is, now that I've kind of moved into running anime stuff, a lot of the pony things that I think worked well, I'm stealing and using in the anime con model.
Yes.
Yeah, I wish that all cons would be a little bit more open about borrowing ideas from like cons that are run drastically different from them. So if you look at like the staffing structure at, you point out these different pony cons branch from different fandoms. And if you look at their staffing structure, it's really reflected in that. How hierarchical they are, how many departments they have, how they communicate. And really so many cons would be better off if they could like break out of the way that they've always done things and look at how other groups of cons do things.
Actually, I think that's actually, I talked about this when I did this panel at furry cons. This is why furry cons, even though at that time they were like the most tech savvy of the con scenes, con staffers, they were almost 2 decades behind in running cons. Like when I went to like my first furry cons in the like around 2014, 2015, they were run like anime cons in the 90s, because the furries branched off directly from the science fiction con room parties, so they kept everything, almost the exact same names and models for registration, the programming track and everything. But because the furries were so heavily harassed by the outside media, the furries would only start hiring staff from within the fandom. They would block the outside media, and because of that, you don't have that intersharing of all the different con staff. So for example, I went to college in Baltimore, right? You have one of the oldest science fiction cons, BaltiCon there, one of the largest anime cons, Oldacon, you have Baltimore Comic Con, and of course you have BronyCon. And all these different cons would basically share a lot of the same staff. So someone might be staffing Oldacon, will also help staff BaltiCon, for example. They might not be fans of science fiction or fans of anime, but they will share staffers because they just love con volunteering. And it's through this like cross-pollination that you had the evolution of how we would be running reg or dealers or programming, which is why the furry cons took so long to adapt a lot of these things. When they finally opened back up, like furry cons used to have panels run back to back without the break in between for close down. They would not have like an AV staff in the room to help you out, and some furry cons are like that today, which I kind of think is crazy.
Anyway, volunteer for con staff.
Please, we need you.
For real. It's
we are
fun.
always desperate.
It's very fun. When I first started going to conventions, it didn't necessarily immediately occur to me to volunteer. It's like, oh, I want to go and do all the things. As you get into it, you start meeting new people, your interactions, like the things that you talk to people about, those things change. And if you've been attending cons for a long time and you want to maybe like mix up your experience, it's a good thing to get into, and I think you'll probably find that there's parts of it that you really love.
It's also funny because you'll hear a lot of longtime con staffers be like, I don't know how to be an attendee anymore.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
I feel so weird just attending cons
I can't do it. I need a job. Like, I have to at least be working with an exhibitor or something.
I've seen that a lot where, like, even like at cons, if I'm not vending or helping staff, I'll see an empty like table. It's like, I could vend right now, or it's like, do you need help on staff? And I see a lot of my friends who say, okay, I'm not working this con, I'm just here for, I'm just here as an attendee, like con staff friends. And then by Saturday, they're like the unofficial second of like a department just because someone needed help and they just ended up taking over that role. So.
You're not selling it. This is a very hard sell. We traumatized for life.
It's working on
It's certainly memorable.
Well, the diplomatic way to put it is that it really trains you to like see a problem and go solve it. Like it gives you so much good experience to figure out like how can you make this better? Like how can you take the power into your own hands and make something really awesome for all the attendees?
It's a very, very, very good way to build real skills that you can make actual money off of. Like, the reason I have the job I do now is stuff I learned doing staffing and running cons. It's not always the easiest to stick it on your resume, but like, it'll show up in your interviews and so on.
Yes. If you could show that you actually, especially for cons of that size, like like most business conferences aren't even like at 3,000 attendees.
Yeah.
So if you could show you were running a con that was like plus 3,000 attendees, that shows the amount of work. In fact, a lot of our friends actually got jobs in the community. Like Fire Envy started working for like hotel catering and events after he was running the vendor hall for BronyCon for the longest time. So, you know, it's a great, it's something to add to your resume, even though you might not, you have to explain it differently. Like, don't say I worked for a pastel horse convention.
Show.
Yeah, my dad calls
absolutely
BronyCon
see
horse trade shows, which I think is the funniest thing ever.
It depends upon, you know, where you're applying for jobs. Like out here in the Bay Area, you're probably fine.
Yeah.
Just flat out say, I'm working for fan conventions, because, you know, this is the nerd capital of the US.
And then they think it's like an industry summit for fans, like air conditioning.
So somebody in this room, I'm gonna call him out. It did a little interview for a job at my company recently, someone I know through the pony fandom, and when asked, how do you know Sheer? He apparently clammed up. And he wouldn't say we met at My Little Pony, we met at BronyCon, we met through the My Little Pony fandom. Totally, whatever, totally reasonable, totally normal, but if you don't say it, it sounds much worse.
Now you're suddenly
You
talking.
dodged the question. Okay, never mind. I had to admit that. You should have admitted it was at BronyCon, then you would have.
Yeah, totally.
And since we want to talk a little about tradition, so the first con I kind of mentioned is WorldCon, which started in 1939. So this is like someone's impression of the first WorldCon is this long line they had for badge pickup. And the fact that like cons today still have long lines for badge pickup, I just like that this is a tradition that's continued since the very first con over 80 years ago. Yeah.
The first ever line
Board
con.
does registration for years, yep, they're
It's
around.
always the same. All right, since we have, technically we could run a little bit over, but since we want to make sure everyone gets out on time, we're going to open the floor up for questions and answers. So if you have any questions, raise your hands. If not, I can still.
Or if you have any answers.
Yeah. We'll start back there and make our way down this way and then this way. So you in the red shirt.
So, the terms BronyCon and Viper, I'm a bit confused with those meetings.
Let me see if I can pull up. I have a slide specifically.
So Viper refers, it's also called GR at some conventions. It's
GR, guest relations, sometimes it's called the
VIP
green room
relations.
department. Yeah, so Viper specifically is like helping, as opposed to like just stressing out your VAs or leaving them in the dark and not knowing where the panels are, security, like actually providing some assistance to your guests to make sure that they're not overworked, but they're also like able to get to places on time, and also if they need to pause from doing autographs, like give them that pause break, bring them the food, make it like a vacation for them. So that's the thing. Like beforehand, it was like work for these guests to come to cons. Now, after the Brony started doing VIPR, it's become more like a vacation for a lot of these guests, and they actually look forward to coming to these conventions and having fun.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a big cultural shift towards viewing these as just like guests to like VIPs, like really, and you know, you could say there's also some bad in putting people like that on a pedestal, but it really represented a big shift in the experience that, you know, fandom, guests from the show, for example, were having when they were coming to fandom cons. And another interesting thing about the VIP relations department is that they were started and run by all of these ex-military people. So they were run with rigor. Like unlike basically any other department at any other con, like the people in charge of these, like they had that stuff on lock. Like they had a chain of command, they had procedures, they were
had
really,
uniforms.
Yeah, they had polos. Yeah, BronyCon, like they had a strict uniform that everyone wore. So it was really this like kind of standardization and like really like getting that stuff on lock. So I guess had a very standard, very good experience.
And then I think the other part of your question was pro-con. So pro-con is as opposed to like a fan or a volunteer con. So something like BabsCon, it's non-profit, it's all run by volunteers, none of the staff are paid, it's just something they do out of the good of their own hearts, as opposed to...
They're normally smaller too, normally a few thousand attendees at most. This is like the traditional model since the first convention, WorldCon, all the way to now. The small cons were this volunteer-run model. And it was the pro-con model. The first one was Creation, which tried to do a pro-run TrekCon in the 70s, but it was really in the 90s when a lot of these conventions started to buy up pre-existing fan-run Comic-Cons and anime cons and started to run them for profit. And I actually kind of think it's funny because New York Comic Con was also partially responsible for a lot of this stuff. So the two founders of New York Comic Con, I don't know why they split, but one of them went to work for Repop and the other one went to found Left Field Media. And what's funny is around the same time, you had Emerald City Comic Con and Rose City Comic Con. These are two fan-run cons in the Pacific Northwest. But Repop bought Emerald City and Left Field bought Rose City. And then when they wanted to move on to making anime cons, Repop actually ended up buying Anime Fest, and they ended up killing it because they tried to merge it with New York Comic Con and it did not work. So they decided to partner with Crunchyroll to make Crunchyroll Expo, and of course Left Field had to do the exact same thing, so they started making a lot of anime cons powered by Crunchyroll. So it's this weird like divorce and incestuous like photocopying that these two founders of New York Comic Con kind of did with the entire modern pro-con scene right now.
I'd be curious to see what happens with Left Field since their founders left to run like the New York Japan Film Festival or whatever. So
yeah, Left Field is.
All right, should we get another question?
Yes, another question. You back there, hat. Yep.
It's not more of a question, but the whole thing with the teeth thing reminded me of what my roommate and I experienced. And is it okay for me to share it with you guys?
Sure.
A teeth story.
Depends on how
Okay,
disturbing it is.
so my roommate and I were at a family convention once upon a time, and her friend and I decided to go and, run us through the empty con because, we get to find all sorts of spare goodies and stuff. And I had this weird incident where we went into one of the rooms and we see two big whole watermelons just sitting there. Just sitting there. And I was like, what in the world? So I picked them up, I was like, hey, go back up. I got two big old watermelons. You want to take it back to the hotel? So he was like, yeah, okay, let's do it. We come back, heading back to the hotel, and then we find this little USB chip, and we're staring at it like, what the heck is it? And so we were like, okay, so is it blueprints for something? Plans for the next con? World domination? A zombie apocalypse? Porn? Yeah, it's gotta be porn. Oh, yeah, you're right. We totally felt so bad when we found out what was in it because we went back to the hotel, we decided to chill, but we all felt, the whole group and I felt into this huge awkward silence because the thing that was bothering us was what was in this damn chip. So my roommate stops what she's doing and then looks at it and it turns out to be 4 gigs of homemade porn.
Oh no!
Yeah, not a good move.
You in the front.
6 months,
I guess-
was unable to live that down because one of my roommate friends just had to bring it up, and I'm sitting here like,
well, now you have a whole room of people.
Yeah.
All right, more questions.
All right, you in the front. Yes.
So to go a completely different route,
Yeah, route.
I guess what makes a good panel and what's the better way of getting, because we've been trying to branch out from our Midwestern area, and I was so happy to go to EverFree last year, but we did not get picked. So I don't know what we did wrong, or like if
Oh,
there's
you
something.
applied to run a panel and you weren't?
Yeah.
That's your
But we went, we had a great time, so thank you, but I just don't think we'll get to go out there again, so I'm just like wondering if there's something we could do to be more successful in the future.
Sure. So, what year did you do this? Oh yeah. So the question is in regards to what makes a good panel. If you're applying to run a panel at a convention, what are the sort of things you should be cognizant of? Which year was it that you?
Last year.
Yeah.
This was last year? Okay. At that time, I wasn't directly involved with the panel applications.
Maybe it was a bad question.
No, it's just a very broad question.
Okay.
So here, you want me to?
Yeah, sure, if you want to.
So number one, practice ahead of time. Like you should absolutely do multiple runs of your panel.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know,
Oh, that wasn't
ideally-
the issue. We applied.
Yeah, I mean, we've been running the same panel since 2016,
Right, okay,
so
okay.
yeah,
I
like,
mean,
plenty
in
of
terms
experience.
of if you want to get at a specific con, you know, it depends on the con. They're going to be highly individualistic as to who's the events runner. It may be like considerations that I will look at when I'm building an event schedule. What is the diversity of panels that I'm accepting? Do they focus on, you know, like it's not just sit and talk? Are there interactive ones? Are there music ones? Is there, you know, something that lets the audience come up and play? So you give people options to pick from. And then the other thing too is it's gonna be like, what's the resume look like? If someone applies and like, I can see they've done panels for 10 years, I'm much more inclined to say yes. And then the third thing that comes to mind is honestly, how much effort do you put into your application? Because
Yeah.
like, we will
Detail
get
is important.
panels that do not have complete sentences in them, and that's basically an automatic no at that point. Like, you know.
Yeah.
And if none of these apply to you, it could also not be personal. I know, I mean, certainly we got tons of great panel ops. Even our baby little con, which had 300 people, we actually got too many panel ops to pick them all, and we really wanted to, but we couldn't. So sometimes it just happens, and it sucks. But it's not necessarily a reflection on
It was a fun.
Yes, but I will say, I think what Dex mentioned is really good, that like the more detailed you could be in an application and break down like
usually.
what's involved, what will the structure be, just provide as much detail as possible, because in some sense that is your shot, right? So you want to put your best foot forward. And I would definitely encourage you to apply again for sure, because yeah, sometimes you run out of space.
And if you're not sure too, attend other ones, see what they're doing that seems to work really well, and then figure out how to imitate it.
Thank you.
All right. Questions on this side? We'll start here and move down. So you in front.
Do you make enough money in-con staff to like feed yourself for a year?
We don't make any money.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we lose money.
Volunteer.
Yeah.
This is volunteer, yes.
It's not just volunteer, you pay your way, so.
Like
It's more
some
like-
cons cannot even comp you a room or flight. Like that's stuff that can't be done.
Most
Especially
cons.
if it's
There are
nonprofit, they can't do
outliers.
that. So
Well, that's. Yeah.
sometimes some cons will like have staff rooms set aside, and you have to room with like 300 strangers you might not know if you don't want to get
What-
your own room. So
What you can often expect to see from staffing a con, and this really varies depending on the con, but usually it will be like, hey, you get your badge, you get, sometimes you get a nice shirt, your staff shirt, and then there will be like a lounge where there might be snacks and that kind of thing. But yeah, due to the nature of it being volunteer run, being a non-profit event, a lot of these are not profitable by any means. So yeah, it really takes that kind of dedication from people who are willing to, you know, do the work, even though they know they're not going to be.
I still might do it.
A lot of cons, yeah, survive because they have behind the scenes people who are not attached to their money.
yeah, I didn't actually
Lots
put
of
out
rich
this-
IT furries.
Yeah, I want
Right,
to point
also
out. Yes, especially furry IT people.
Suspiciously wealthy furries.
Yes.
I just want to point out that the suite you were talking about actually started as the hospitality suite at a lot of sci-fi cons. Specifically, the 1940 Chicago Worldcon was the first to have this type of suite. Most cons actually got away from it, but some furry cons that branched out directly continued the hospitality suite. That's where Dormy provides like free drinks and food to attendees, because you have to remember, before the pro con model, for these early cons, you were a member. You're paying for membership to a club, and this is your club meeting. So all the food was supposed to be provided for you. But once cons started to grow over 1,000, a lot of cons couldn't do that. So that actually evolved to the zoo at a lot of furry cons, and most cons don't have this equivalent anymore.
If they do, it's usually a staff-only
Yeah.
perk.
All right. Other questions? Yes, you.
So this one's not really a question, but the picture you showed of basically the line or whatever, like the comparison or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I think of this? I think of this as like the first ever line con.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Almost every con's a live
And
con.
to this day, that con is still going.
Also, the first Worldcon was actually in the black. Sales. Most cons end up in the red, so you know the first Worldcon actually made it in the black. So. All right, we could probably take 2 more questions. So we see you and you. So we'll start with you first, and then you last.
Okay. So actually, I'm kind of interested in the ribbons. I come from Los Angeles, where there's Anime Los Angeles, that has a very, very rich ribbon collecting culture that did stem from science fiction, because a lot of the staffers were in the science fiction convention.
Yep.
But I was trying to look all over the place about like, how did they come up with like, you know, the first science fiction, you know, where did the idea of like trading ribbons come from?
You know,
Now they're
that's
even
funny.
becoming utilitarian.
Someone brought that up earlier because they were mentioning actually at the QuaiCon, the AnimeCon Hawaii last weekend. Someone brought that up because I also go into ALA, which also has that ribbon tradition, and people were telling me, you know, because business cons also do the same thing now. So it's like, wait, were the business cons the first to do it, or did the business cons adapt it from the science fiction cons? I don't know, because I think the science fiction cons are the first to do this the earliest, and they have fun. Like at the last BronyCon I was at, because my ribbons will fill up to like meters long, I specifically, like, I will only take ribbons of something I was associated with. So if I won an award or did something, and it was still at least 2 meters long. I think the science fiction fans are they're just a bunch of boomers who want to have fun. So that's what they basically came up with. And actually it makes sense, because they were kids during this period. So when they started to work in IT and science fields, and these groups started to naturally have their own business conventions, of course they will take this DNA that they had when they were kids at a con and bring it to these events. That's my personal theory, because we saw this big rise of NASA employees after Star Trek came out. So I think it makes sense a lot of these business events also have the ribbons because of that. And of course, since all these other cons naturally came from science fiction cons, they of course will have the ribbon tradition as well.
Thank you so much. That's awesome to know. Thank you.
Last question, we'll take you.
First, a quick comment. For those who are thinking of staffing a con, I used to staff for this con in AD, and although it's hard work, it's very rewarding. It's a lot of fun. I highly recommend staffing a con.
Yes.
Also, you do get staff fee, at least at this con. They do feed you. My question is, what is your favorite convention memory? Or actually, specifically, pony convention memory? I think
So,
that's a good
pony
question.
convention memory. Okay. Start the end.
My favorite pony convention memory was closing ceremonies for BronyCon 2019, and just like being up on stage. I got a standing ovation for my speech at the end, which was really, really sweet, and something I never expected would happen. And it was just like this beautiful moment of like this fandom and cinema that has changed my life so much over the course of the last many years, just like really coming together. And it still makes me tearful, but when I think about it.
Yeah, that was probably like the sweetest and most emotionally powerful, is that in the immediate aftermath, and just like hugging crying attendees who needed that, you know, little bit of extra like, it will be okay.
I also liked Shear's speech and the aftermath. That was very emotional backstage to leading up to that, for real. Which, by the way, so from the perspective of the mascots, right? There were 3 of us, and like we would do these sort of skits, interactions, opening and closing ceremonies. They didn't tell us that the next year would be the last one until right before closing. And so this thing just like hitting us right there, and it's like, okay, go on stage. What? Like
We could have thought that through a little better.
Okay. No, that was perfectly sadistic.
Yeah. So that was a really cool memory, because it really showed how important the event was to so many people. And I think BronyCon generally has always been memorable to me, since in being in that role, the number of people that would like come up and talk to us while we were in character as the mascots. And at the end of everyone after closing, we were like glorified mall Santas, basically.
Your line was insane.
Yeah.
It was through the lobby.
And hearing people talk very genuinely with you about their background, their story, difficulties they faced in their life, and how this fandom helped them overcome certain issues, come out of their shell in some sense. People that I don't know very well, I maybe like, I'll learn this person's name, and then they're telling you their life story, and it's just, that was a really interesting experience to be able to have that sort of, I guess, like, have that brief
sort of intimate connection with someone, which really goes to show again just how impactful the community as a whole has been. So yeah, really good memory.
And I think my final favorite memory was also from the final BronyCon. I record it and I now actually use it to end this version of the panel I do at cons. I recorded the final concert where everyone broke out singing "Isn't It Great to Be Different?" And I only showed it at PonyCons when I do this panel, but then I started showing it at furry cons and it just hit everybody, and I showed it at AnimeCon last weekend. And it's just a universal song, "Great to Be Different," and I think I'm going to play it as we're exiting. I'm just going to have it on screen so you can watch the version I recorded at BronyCon. But that was like my favorite memory. And I think with that, I'm going to allow everyone to plug because you're still running events. You're still helping with your local event, so I want to allow them to plug themselves before we close off. So,
do you like idols? Do you like the little anime girls who like do the dancing and singing? I'm really selling this right now, I know. Do you like the glow sticks? Dex and I now run Northwest Idol Fest and SoCal Idol Fest, happening somewhat locally to here in LA, not that local. So if you are a fan of J-pop, a little bit of K-pop, Japanese idols, Bang Dream, all sorts of those like fun Japanese idol culture things, we are running an event just for you. It's going to be super amazing. SoCal Idol Fest is this August. Northwest Idol Fest is this October in Seattle at the old EverFree venue. So if you're nostalgic, come on by, enjoy.
Get those free cookies.
Yeah, get the free cookies. Yeah, so that's what we're doing. That's our plug.
It's basically high energy and a song to like let you just go completely hype in every way possible.
The best concert of your lives.
I just want to say, you two again are starting something that might be a completely new branch in the con history thing. So it's great. It's great to see this started because that, and I think our friend Rat, who's doing the VTuber cons, are the other ones where we're seeing new natural evolutions of new type of genre cons coming up.
Yeah, like part of Idol Fest existing is literally me going, anime is big enough to specialize, just as anime once specialized itself from science fiction.
Exactly.
Like, I go to anime cons, I'm like, I like Demon Slayer, but that's not why I'm here. You know, I know Genshin exists, it's not why I'm here. So it's about creating a new space for a specific community to come together.
You should come to EverFree Northwest in Seattle, Washington. Yep, we're still going. It'll be 11 years this time around. Longest running 3-day event in the fandom, continuing to keep the torch of the fandom lit in Seattle. So we would love for you to come check that out. And we have a table that you can visit us tomorrow and on Sunday out there outside of the vendor hall. And we're also doing a room party tonight in 2080 if you're over 21.
And I might be doing a new secret con in Seattle as well, but keep your eyes peeled for the next year or so. Genre I really like that hasn't had its own con might be starting in Seattle as well. But in the meantime, you can follow me on Con History. I'm doing the Con History book. I'm going to be uploading all my videos to this channel. And with that, I'm doing creating transformative art tomorrow. So if you want to talk about legal issues with copyright law and stuff, that's another topic I'm fascinated about. Come there tomorrow, 6:30 as well. With that, thank you all for coming to BabsCon. Thank you for coming to our panel. Hope you have a good time. Come up and grab one of these lanyards if you want. So Con History lanyards.